This video is kind of addressed to someone I know, someone in my own family, maybe a few people in my family. Not my nuclear family, my wife and kids and all that, but close kin nonetheless. And why would I make this video when the person who should see it probably won't watch it or understand it? Because it's not just them. It's not just me and my relatives. It's almost all of us. I've heard several stories over the last several years in different parts of the country and even in other countries about how we all seem to be losing longtime friends and family to deliberately divisive, politically polarized propaganda with conspiracy theories and pseudoscientific nonsense designed to make us hate even those we were close to. The thing that motivated me to become an activist back around Y2K was that while I thought we were all just living our lives and getting along for the most part, some religious extremists online told me that we were actually in a culture war, whatever the hell that is, and that they intended to escalate that into a real war, wherein a handful of Christian dominionists and reconstructionists, collectively known as Christian nationalists, explained to me that their goal was ultimately to undermine the Constitution and overthrow our democratic republic to erect an authoritarian theocracy in its stead. And both factions said that they wanted a new America to enforce what they imagined to be God's law, with the Reconstructionists saying that they wanted the government to enforce Levitical law, as in the book of Leviticus. You thought Sharia was bad. And part of their strategy to turn an imaginary culture war into a real war, another civil war, requires Americans to be divided into two factions to promote tribalism, wherein there has to be a clear distinction between only two classes of people, and they have to be at extreme opposite ends. It can't be, for example, that there are some Christians who accept evolution. No, it has to be that you can't be godly or saved at all unless you're a biblical literalist, fundamentalist, religious extremist, and that accepting the science makes you a damnable, godless heathen. That kind of binary thinking that doesn't allow for nuance and that makes it easier to distance yourself from the other, whoever you want to perceive as your enemy. And the next step is to dehumanize whoever you've chosen to be your enemy, so that you are good and righteous and they are a despicable abomination. And when all that turns political, then it gets even worse, such that the righteous paladins of justice and the inhuman hordes of damnable evil can be siblings of the same parents, and their parents can be divorced on either side of this preposterous rift too. And for example, I went to visit my mom and found her watching some extreme right-wing show that she thought was news, and they said that every Democrat and every Hollywood celebrity were all devil-worshipping, cannibalistic pedophiles. So I asked her, Mom, you don't really think that Tom Hanks drinks raped baby's blood while he worships Satan, do you? And she replied, you can't prove he doesn't. I'm sure we all have friends and family who, when you look at their social media, it's a cesspool of irrational, wholly unrealistic, prejudicial bigotry that is not just demonstrably false on virtually every point, but also more basely promotes pointlessly divisive hatred. Last week, I happened to see a post from a close relative who shared this image, comparing Democrats to Nazis. Most everything on their timeline was almost as bad, but I couldn't help but comment on this one. Sadly, the response I got was little more than a laughing emoji. That and the comment that we don't hate you, just your godless soul, which, if I believed in a soul, soul is supposed to be the core of your being, who you really are. So you're saying you don't hate me, you just hate me. And then I saw this same image popping up on Twitter too. So I figured that I should address it more broadly, because we know that the closer we get to this election, that this is just going to get worse. These divisions will only get deeper, more polarized, and potentially violent. Because this election, like the last one, is the most profoundly important that we've ever had in my lifetime, or ever, really. So shit like this has to be addressed now and continuously, strongly, right through the election and beyond that too. Whoever created this meme is not fluent in the internet. They're not aware of Godwin's law, that in any internet discussion, a comparison to Hitler or the Nazis is eventually inevitable. And nor is my family familiar with the traditional application of Godwin's law, being that whoever first makes a comparison to Hitler or the Nazis has effectively lost that point. But let's tear into it deeper and do it properly and systematically, starting from the top, with the claim that Nazis and Democrats are both socialists. No, neither is true. Hitler referred to the Nazis as the National Socialist German Workers' Party in the same way that other dictators might promise a democratic People's Republic when they're not democratic at all. So, yeah. But even Americans know that we got the concept of socialism and communism from Karl Marx. And many Americans, especially the ones I'm talking to and about, think that communism, socialism, and Marxism are all the same thing. But the Nazis were rather famously anti-Marxist. You see, Marxism, communism, and socialism are on the left side of the political compass, the far left. But the Nazis were fascists. They're on the far right. You can be a right-winger, but not far enough to the right to be fascist. Or you could be a left-winger, but not far enough left to be socialist. The problem is when the propaganda turns everything into the extreme right versus the radical left. Because right-wing talking heads can't say the word leftist without adding the adjective to radicalize it. And this is deliberate. This is not something self-respecting journalists would do. This is what propagandists do. To deceive you, to grab you by your baser instincts and manipulate you emotionally. Thus, every leftist becomes a communist, as if there was no vertical axis between authoritarian and libertarian, as if there isn't even a horizontal axis because there are no gradations going from left to right. No democratic socialists, no social democrats, just left side, right side, that's it. In the binary thinking of this type of propaganda, everyone has to be in one of two boxes, such that liberals are painted as if they're leftists, and even moderate right-wingers are also cast as if they're leftists too. The fascists count everyone who is not on the far right as if they're all the way on the far left, such that Joe Biden is declared to be a radical leftist and a socialist, even though he is definitely a capitalist. The problem we have with him on the left is that he's not left at all. He's actually on the right. He's more moderate than some of the fascists that are there now, but he's still now and always has been on the authoritarian right quadrant of the political compass, not on the left in any sense at all. And he's a lifelong Catholic, and yet the Trump supporters want to pretend that he literally worships Satan because you guys never met a conspiracy theory you didn't like. No, Biden he's Christian, he's right-wing, he's capitalist. As a matter of fact, every president in my lifetime has been on the authoritarian right quadrant of the political compass. That's both Republicans and Democrats, all of them. We've never had a left-wing president in all that time. Not since FDR gave us Social Security and the New Deal that brought us out of the Great Depression by regulating banks and public utilities that would be otherwise predatory. You can thank left-wing policies for that. I thought that JFK might have been left-leaning, being as progressive as he was, or that Jimmy Carter might be on the left since he built houses to help the poor. But no, it turns out that the most left-leaning president in my lifetime was actually Richard Nixon, a then moderate Republican who created both the Environmental Protection Agency and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and he reserved a number of national parks as well. Not a great guy, no. Still a right-winger who did shadier things than just Watergate, but at least he did some good things too by giving us some left-wing policies. And one way to define the left is that we value human rights over corporate profits. We're the ones saying, well, what about their rights? Because we want equality under the law. We want the law to apply equally to everyone. But the right-wingers say, what about my rights? Because they don't want equality. They want superiority and special privilege to be protected by laws that oppress everyone else. And that's why they say that freedom of religion only applies to Christians, that you're free to worship Jesus however you see fit, but that other religions do not have freedom or equal right to worship their version of God according to their faith. And of course, you don't have a right to not worship anything at all according to your conscience either. The founding fathers wanted to grant us that. The Republicans want to take it away. And more importantly, and while things have gotten more extreme here recently, and the Republican Party is now virtually all on the far right, Democrats remain diverse. We have right-wing establishment corporatists, capitalists like Joe Biden, along with moderates and liberals arguing against left-leaning progressives, and we have a pitiful few socialists too, all within one party. So the Nazis were not socialist, and neither are the Democrats. I'm a Democrat. I vote Democrat. I ran for office as a Democrat because you almost have to run as one of the two main parties. Independents can't even vote in some primaries. So I am registered Democrat, but I'm not a socialist. I know I'm not because I took a battery of independent political quizzes that all put me in the middle of the libertarian left quadrant of the political compass. I'm not a left-leaning centrist. I'm in the center of the left, listed as a social democrat. If I were a little further to the left than I am, further left than most Democrats are, then I would be a democratic socialist. And I would still be outnumbered by all those Democrats who are not socialists nor on the left at all. And next we have the Nazis and the Dems, both supposedly demanding no guns. However, the Nazis only restricted firearms for the people they deemed undesirable, while they actually loosened prior gun restrictions for those who favored their party. And compare that to today's Republicans, the right-wing Republicans who are bragging that, the right-wingers have all the guns and the left doesn't have any. That claim is false, but it does show a similarity between the Nazi Party and today's Republicans, where that similarity doesn't exist with the Democrats. I say today's Republicans because Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan both advocated gun control, to take guns away. Reagan even signed an assault weapons ban when he was governor of California. And remember that Joe Biden is a moderate right-winger, and Beto O'Rourke is a liberal, not a leftist. And both of them have said things similar to what Reagan and Nixon said against guns. But there's a saying, if you go far enough left, you get your guns back. I have guns. I think every leftist I know has guns. And some of them, those who really are socialists or communists and the like, they collect guns. And they have an arsenal that would put my father's armory to shame. So, no. Nazis were not socialist. Democrats are not necessarily socialist either, and many socialists and communists and so on believe that everyone has a right to bear arms. They don't say no guns. That's just wrong. Next up is the allegation that Nazis and Dems both engage in censorship. But we're not the ones emptying libraries by banning or burning books. It's Republicans who are doing that. The Democrats are against all that. We're not the ones striking any mention of civil rights from our schools' history books. Republicans are the ones forcing censorship in our classrooms on science, sex, and social studies. We're against all that too. So stop blaming us for what your party is doing. And this brings us to the next false accusation. The Democrats employ media mind control. And while it is true that the Nazis did broadcast propaganda campaigns as bad as Fox News and One America News and other far-right orgs like that, Democrats don't do that. We're not the ones lying in the media. Quit projecting your own faults onto us. Now, one of my in-laws chimed in to say that CNN lies worse than Fox. And there's several problems with that. First is that there's not just these two. I get my news from various sources, not just CNN. And while I don't trust any news source completely, I know that CNN does not lie worse than Fox, whose chairman, Rupert Murdoch, admitted in court that his talking heads on his channel did in fact knowingly lie as a matter of course, pushing misinformation in order to perpetuate propaganda to mislead the public on all things political. That's why Fox had to pay $787 million fine over their lies over Dominion voting systems. And I think they're still facing another $2.7 billion lawsuit over Smartmatic. And notice that's not happening with CNN, MSNBC, the BBC, or any of the mainstream media, whose stories can all be verified with other independent sources, where Fox failed to defend their shit. They're the only ones saying this, and there's nothing to back it up. Not even after they went to court 60 times with Rudy Giuliani and failed every attempt. And often they don't have to defend themselves because, unlike all these other real news sources, Fox is not actually news. They aren't journalists. They're largely protected under the umbrella of being entertainment only. And studies have shown that if Fox is your primary news source, then you are actually less informed than if you never watched any news at all. Another problem with the idea that CNN is just as bad as Fox is not just the tu quoque fallacy that you're just as bad as me, which wouldn't mean that you're innocent. There's also the fact that Fox is lying to you. You admit that. You know they're lying to you, yet you believe it anyway. That's religion, isn't it? That's what religion is all about. It's just like when you go to church. Or, well, if you were to go to church. Because the people I'm talking to are like most Christians, I think. They've never cracked open a Bible. They don't know or care what it says, but they believe it. That's why when they see something like this that shows that they got almost everything wrong, they don't get embarrassed and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Thanks for correcting me. I'll take it down before anyone else sees it." No, there's no accountability there. They know they're being lied to. They now know they're spreading those lies, but they don't care either way. So all they give me is a laugh emoji and a logical fallacy, which serves as an admission that they don't care what the truth is. And that's the problem that I have with right-wing Republican religious conservatives. They believe in lies, and they will lie for those beliefs. They don't care what the truth is. Earlier this week, a believer told me that he's the kind of guy that wants just the facts. So I started to list some of the facts in evolution, and he stopped me to say that he admitted that he actually doesn't care about the facts, that they don't matter to him because they're not going to change his mind. And yesterday, another believer told me that he has the right to believe things that are false. I've heard several admissions like this over the course of my career. Confessions from make-believers who say that they have the right to be wrong. They're going to... They believe in things that are not true, that they know are not true, but they're going to believe in it anyway, and they're not going to let any inconvenient truth change their mind. Completely irrational. There's another old saying that it's easier to lie to someone than to convince them they've been lied to. And that's the only explanation for how you could seriously believe that scientists and scholars, historians and economists and journalists have all dedicated their entire lives to deceiving you, rather than accept that you might have been fooled by some of the 30,000 lies told by your favorite fraud, your president. The previous president, not the current one. Well, that depends on another argument, too, because a lot of you want to pretend that the previous president is still the president, as if. Because, many years before he was president, Trump was already found liable and fined tens of millions of dollars for fraudulent business practices, right? The guy is a crime boss, lifelong, and he's a woefully ignorant incompetent. And don't pretend that both sides are just as bad. I hated Bill and Hillary Clinton separately because I knew of one time each that they had lied. Not tens of thousands of lies, just one. Because we have a higher standard than you do. Your man is facing 91 felony charges that don't include the crimes he committed years ago when Republicans refused to convict him, because yours is not the law and order party. There was only one thing that this meme got right. I do support a woman's right to bodily autonomy. And I support a child's right not to be forced into a life-threatening birth after being raped. Because another way to tell the left from the right is that we promote, preserve, and protect human rights, while the right, ironically, wants to take them away. So in a sense, the political left is right, and the political right is wrong. I'm on the board of directors of a national 501c3, the battery of lawyers whose mission is primarily defense of the First Amendment, because Republican religious conservatives in general, and the Trump administration in particular, have tried to undermine every single provision therein. I could and probably should make another video just about that, but this one is already too long. The next item on this list is the allegation that it's the Democrats who hate Jews rather than Republicans. We're told by Republicans that the Democrats are ruled by Jewish people, that we're all somehow on the payroll of George Soros, for example. And while it is true that the Ku Klux Klan were mostly Democrats back in the first half of the 20th century, that changed in the 1960s as the Southern strategy prompted our political parties to swap some of their positions. If I was an adult in the year that I was born, 1962, I would have been a proud Republican then. And the Klansmen, who were Democrats back then, are Republicans now. It was Republicans, Republican white supremacists, who marched on Charlottesville saying, "Jews will not replace us." The anti-Semitic people are on the Republican side. The white supremacists are on the Republican side. The Democratic Party is where the Jews are, so we don't hate Jews. We don't hate white people either. That's another lie that the racists came up with, trying to project their own faults onto everyone else. I see it all the time. Religious people want to pretend that I'm religious. The racists want to pretend as if I'm the racist. They can't defend their position, so they try to pretend as if I have their problem. Or if they can't do that, then if we remember mistakes that this country has made, so that it might not make those same mistakes again, then they lie about us, saying that we hate our country. Or if we want to acknowledge civil rights issues and the opposition they once faced historically, then they lie about us again, saying that we hate ourselves as well, rather than admit and correct their own issues. They're trying to get their own stink onto us. And finally, it says here that Democrats worship the government, which is another lie. We want a smaller government than Republicans do. Religious right conservatives, the MAGA people and so on, they want an oppressive authoritarian state that regulates the most intimate aspects of your personal life and identity, that stops you and orders your papers if you look suspicious, that is almost Soviet, Cold War style government. That's what they want. We Democrats have very little trust for the government, but when Trump was in power, you literally did worship that government, that administration. You worshiped that government. You're accusing me? I've never worshipped I've never admired any administration, including the current one. Biden didn't disappoint me as much as I thought he would, as fast as he would. I take everybody and weigh positives and negatives. That's just a way to evaluate it. I don't see things in terms of black and white. I see them as nuance. Regarding the political compass, I realize that we're not just in this box or that box, but there's a bell curve, and most of us tend to be right around the middle. Look at this meme again. We do have a few socialists, probably fewer than you have Republicans promoting abortion. Otherwise, all the stuff that this says doesn't apply to Democrats at all. The rest of this applies to Republicans, and only to Republicans. So by spreading this meme, you're hypocrites. And not just that, you're spreading lies. And not just that, you're spreading hate. And lately it seems that the Republican Party is all about hate. Hatred of Jews, hatred of queer folk, hatred of immigrants, hatred of anybody who isn't speaking English, or who isn't straight or white or Christian or conservative. You literally demonize and dehumanize everyone who isn't Republican, even your own family and friends. And you vote against your own interests, as if hurting yourself is okay as long as you can stick it to the libs. My final message is this, that Republicans who say they want a smaller government actually want the biggest, most obtrusive and oppressive and invasive government they can get. And many of those who claim to be for the Constitution have already said that they're ready to throw it out. And those who identify as patriots are actually trying to bring the American constitutional experiment to an end. Like Donald Trump himself said, the American dream is dead, because he killed it. With all this projection, Trump says that if he doesn't win, then you won't have a country anymore. Understand that if he wins, then you won't have a country anymore. If that happens, then everything that I fight for effectively won't exist anymore. Benjamin Franklin said that you have a republic if you can keep it. Elect Trump and you'll lose it. We all will. He has made his dictatorial desires known many times in many ways, often explicitly. You pretend as if Democrats are like Nazis while you vote for a criminally corrupt wannabe dictator who says he likes Hitler.
Are we close to seeing Mr. Kim here at the White House?
Could happen. I mean,
they talked about that yesterday.
I think it's something that could happen. Yeah. Hey, he's the head of a country, and I mean, he is the strong head. Mm-hmm. Don't let anyone think anything different. Right. He speaks, and his people sit up at attention. I want my people to do the same.